Hello, I'm Kyle Stallones. We're here today on May 4th, 2023. We're here at the Tomball Museum Center in the church building at the museum, here with JoAnn Buvinghausen Ehrhardt, and we're going to talk about her memories. This video is part of our ongoing video series, our oral history project, to record the memories of folks who lived in the North Harris County, South Montgomery County area and made this area such a great place to live. You can see this video along with our other videos on our YouTube channel at Tomball Museum. Would you give us your name, please, JoAnn?
JoAnn Buvinghausen Ehrhardt.
And when were you born?
I was born April 8th, 1938.
Where were you born?
I was actually born at Heights Hospital.
That's in Houston?
In Houston.
I guess that's before they had a good hospital out this way, right?
Correct.
Right. We're here in the church building, the Trinity Evangelical Lutheran Church building, and I had a photograph of it here. Would you hold that up for the camera? And how do you pronounce the name of the little community where this church originally was?
Nydorf.
And where was that community?
It was off of Grant Road, about 2 or 3 miles west of Spring Cypress. And the land had been donated by some Schmidts, and their daughter married a Dossman. And the land is still there because it was only to be used as a church. And they organized in 1876, and they worshiped in the school. And I thought it was a church school, but also I have found it was a community school because the county had schools. And it's listed as a county school too.
Served both purposes.
So it was a community center.
Great.
And they decided they wanted a building for their own church. The members cut logs from their property. There was a sawmill across the road from where the church was being built. And that was where the lumber came from. Each member was to put in 18 days of labor. Of course, it took a lot more than that. And the ladies, all right, all the labor was hand saw and hammer, no electric tools then. The ladies' part was to feed the men as they worked. So,
roughly what year did they build this church building?
It was in 1900 to about 1905.
And before then, they had used that one-room schoolhouse?
Yes.
Yeah. Is that one-room schoolhouse, that building itself, still there? Or
no.
Okay. Give us an idea of where both of those buildings were back then.
All right. The school was across the road from where the church was built. I know a Miss Cron was a teacher. I don't remember the other teachers, but they were local teachers. And it wasn't a full 3 miles west of Spring Cypress onto Grant. But it was before Grant turned and went back west. And it stood there until it came to Tomball in the 60s.
1960s? Okay.
The church started being vandalized, and local people who had been members took, like the baptismal font, the organ, the altarware. They took them to their homes in their attics and stored them. They were so elated when it came to Tomball. They brought all of it back.
Wonderful.
So we can enjoy it.
This sign that's in front of our church, you want to hold that up, it has an interesting name underneath. You can look at it there. It's Nidorf Drankets. What is that?
Drankitis congregation.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure with the drink.
Okay.
One of the Dossman's sons painted this sign himself.
So here at the museum, I know you've helped us and you're on the board here at the museum. How long have you been working with us here at the Tomball Museum, Spring Creek County Historical Association? How long have you been helping here?
I don't know.
It's a long time, right?
It's been a while, yeah.
And so when you act as docent here for school kids coming to the church, what do you share with the school kids about this building?
Okay. I share about the time it was built, that the families built it themselves. The organ, the ladies' aid wanted music, so they said, okay, you raise the money and you can order it. They had very long services. So after church, the men were ready to buy baked goods. And that's how they raised. Then ladies worked in the home. They did not have outside jobs. And they raised $50, and the organ is from Washington, New Jersey, which is, we know what it is now, D.C. And they shipped it to them. It's a pump organ.
You pump it with your feet?
You pump it with your feet. It builds, there's a bellows inside that collects air. And there are stops, like with a trumpet or something. You can pull these sounds out. Brief definition I tell the children of an organ is an orchestra in a box. And the organist is pumping and playing. And
About how old is that organ, that pump organ?
about 1900s.
Wow. Mm-hmm. About the same time as when this church building was built,
Yes.
then, right? Great. So you were telling me earlier about a story when you were a child. Were you a child in this church?
Yes.
About what age do you have memories of this church?
Probably 6 to 8 to 10 or 12. At Christmas time, we had a Christmas tree over in that corner, and it was lit with live candles. So the elders would sit behind the tree with burlap and a pail of water, and in case there was a fire breakout.
Yeah.
Under the tree was this big bag of fruit, nuts, Christmas candy, all kind of treats. And each child got one of those. We all had a part in the Christmas story, and we were told that if you turn around, you face the audience, and say your part clearly, you'll have a surprise at home. And that's when Santa came.
Great.
So,
And you were telling me earlier we have a metal plate on the ceiling. Tell us about that.
in the winter, they would put a potbelly stove. If you were near the stove, you were hot. if you were further back, the museum floor has a single floor, and it's on blocks. So the cold would come through. Mm-hmm. For the elderly, a lot of times they would wrap bricks, hot, warm bricks, so they could keep their feet warm. If their feet were warm, they were warm.
So the metal now is covering up the hole where the stovepipe went for
Yes.
that potbelly stove? Very interesting. And you were telling about the baptismal font here. Tell us about that.
Okay. The Lutherans baptize infants, and they would also bring warm bricks. So the water would be warm and wouldn't startle the child as bad. And they were very caring people. And then the electric lights came in about 1945. We had lights on West Montgomery in 1938. But it took a while for the lights to get around.
And so these other lights, they look like maybe kerosene? What?
They're kerosene, and there's a little lever that they could lower the light, the chandelier, and take and add to the oil to the lamps and trim the wicks and have it ready for, they could light them and then raise them.
So how old are those chandeliers?
Well, I guess they're as old as the church, but I found a patent for 1876.
Yeah, beautiful old chandeliers, aren't they?
Yes.
Nice. And you were telling me about the story. We have carpet now, but did you have a little accident here near the altar?
I guess I was running in church when I shouldn't. And Mother was tending to things on the altar. I hit my nose on that edge. I knew it for a long time. Yeah. Now, when in the early church, the men and boys, confirmed boys, sat on one side, and the ladies and children sat on the other side. It was just an old custom. The pastor would read from a lectern, usually about here, and for his service, he would go up here. He could see everyone, and everyone could see him for his message. This organ came from the Baptist church after the church moved here. It's electric, and it was donated in honor of John Ferris that used to work at the bank. And this is Tomball history, but his daddy was Cecil Ferris that had the shop on Main Street.
Yeah, the gas station.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen his photographs with the gas station and the gas pumps out front.
Right.
And he was also mayor for a while.
Yes, he was.
All right.
Yeah.
So that organ, the electric one, that was at First Baptist Church?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay, First Baptist.
And John was an officer at the Garrity Bond State Bank. So.
And I noticed over here, it looked like there's a cutout, maybe a door was there at one time?
All right, that cutout was when they later built a parish hall, and they had a door going out. But that came many years later.
I see.
The pastors did not get a lot of income, and they went to the board for a raise. I don't remember the year. And one year they did not give him a raise, but each member gave him a bushel of corn for his horse, his animal. Another year, he asked for wood, so each family gave him wood for cooking and warmth and things like that.
And you mentioned they sawed their own wood, cut down their own logs, sawed it into wood for this church. And the sawmill, do you remember who had that sawmill back then? Or do you know?
I don't remember. I really don't. And
I was looking on the map a bit west of where Nydorf and this church was. There was a Nydorf Fritchie Cemetery out there. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, it was after Grant Road made a turn and went more west. It was several miles up on, I think, Fritchie Road.
Did a lot of the parishioners that attended this church use that cemetery?
A lot of them did.
I see.
Our family had a cemetery where JoAnn, my dad's grandmother, was buried, and Louise Mattia, the mother of JoAnn. And there were some stillborn children, and you asked me about the other family. Joseph Buvinghausen, Daddy's uncle, had some children that were buried there.
And that was called, what's the name of it?
It's known now as Buvinghausen Cemetery.
So let's go back to your immediate family. You were born and raised in the area south of Tomball there at Spring Cypress and West Montgomery Road, right?
Correct.
And your married name is Ehrhardt. Tell us about that, your immediate family.
Okay. I crossed the tracks. My husband was Bernard Ehrhardt, and we lived off of Klein Cemetery Road behind the Lutheran Cemetery. And where I lived, it was Bernard's grandmother had been a stroke. And Fritz, his grandfather, came from Germany and was related to the Dr. Ehrhardt's family. And but we have, in 1880 is when they started farming it. We still have cows on it, and our grandson has those cows.
Great. So the Dr. Ehrhardt that you're talking about, we have here at the museum the little small doctor's office, Dr. Ehrhardt's office. Where did that building come from?
It came from, there's a Walmart on 1960. Used to be Jackrabbit Road. And his family, his mother, lived there.
Is it near Kirkendall?
Yeah, Northgate Country Club. There's a street going into it. Their family cemetery is right off of that street. Now, George and Maria were the parents that came from Germany. George was visiting his daughter across the creek, Cypress Creek, and there was a flood. He passed away, and there was no way they could get him back across. So he is buried in the Strock Cemetery, kind of across from Strock School in the woods. And he's buried there, and his wife is buried off of the street going into Northgate in the Ehrhardt Cemetery.
What year did you and Bernard get married?
1958.
Okay. And what were your kids' names?
Dwayne is the oldest. David is the middle child. And then Elizabeth, or Beth, is our youngest daughter.
Do you have grandkids and great-grandkids?
Okay. All right. Dwayne lives on part of the property next to Spring Creek Forest. And David lives right behind the cemetery.
So let's go to your parents. What were the names of your parents?
Dad was Joseph Henry, named after his uncle.
Joseph Henry Buvinghausen?
Mm-hmm. And mother was Elnora Anita Dietrich. They married in 1930 in Houston. The Depression era. Daddy had been working for a bank. Times were tough, so they moved to the farm. They had another house on the farm. And my sister Margie was born then in 1931 in December.
So what were your other siblings' names?
I was the middle child, born in 38. Beverly Sue is my youngest sister, and she was born in 47. And so she now lives near Dallas.
And your older sister?
Margie married Frank. Her first husband was Frank Gerhardt. He had been in the service, and he contacted Bright's disease, a kidney disease, and he passed away. And then later, Margie married Harvey Wonderdick, and they lived down close to Mom and Dad. Then later, they sold and moved to Willis.
Any other siblings?
That's us.
Okay.
Just three of us.
All right. And so you mentioned the farm. Where was that farm located?
The farm was the original. It was about a mile west of Spring Cypress, on the right side of the left side of the road, excuse me. And they gradually bought, that was in the Deppenbrook survey. They gradually bought more properties and land across the road, and so.
So if we're going south of Tomball down West Montgomery Road, which is now is 249, and you turn right on Spring Cypress, the original place would have been on the left down there?
Yes.
Right. About how far down?
About a mile.
About a mile. And about how many acres was that original place?
I think it started out at 50, and they kept
adding
to it.
And then eventually y'all bought the corner right
Then
at Spring Cypress, and
Dad had bought that corner, or they had bought that corner. Grandpa had the corner, and then Dad inherited 60 acres.
what is on that corner now?
The waffle place.
And Walmart?
And then Walmart is further down.
Yeah.
It's a very busy corner now.
Yeah. All right. And so when your dad and mom owned it and lived there, where did y'all live?
Okay. It was a 2-story building.
Do you have a photo of it there?
It was 2 stories. The store was downstairs. We had a kitchen and dining room downstairs behind it. Upstairs were our bedrooms and bathroom.
And roughly when did this building get built? Do you know? Have an idea?
They opened the store in 1938. Grandpa, Dad, and his brothers all worked on building it. And they opened it in January. I was born in April. They owned it till 1959, and they sold it to a Manning, and then Aunt Erna and her husband had owned it for a while.
Irma who? What was it?
Erna
Erna?
Moore.
More.
The highway pretty well did it in. But I rode my bicycle down Spring Cypress on the dirt road. And then in 1948, they paved it. They didn't pave the part going to Spring for about 3 or 4 more years. But going towards Spring, there were a lot of roads that were 90-degree turns. And when they paved that, they took a lot of them out. This is a funny picture, but it's the 46 Ford truck that Dad hauled feed and ice and groceries in.
How did he haul the ice?
It had a metal flatbed on it with sideboards, and he would go into Heights Ice Company and cover the ice after he got it on the truck with burlap sacks and tarpaulins, and he headed straight home and then put the ice in the little ice house. It was about 10 by 12, 10 by 14 inside, and had thick walls filled with sawdust for insulation. And a lot of the people had ice boxes, but the Harris County work camp would send the worker down with all of their drink coolers, and about a 12.5-pound piece of ice would sit in these coolers, and they would serve them through the day.
Mm-hmm. And would people buy blocks of ice still for those ice box where it's not like a refrigerator today that it was kept cold by a block of ice?
The ice was up on top, and it had a little pipe that drained as it would melt, to a pan beneath it, and that would keep their stuff cold. So
you have another photo there?
This was at Mom and Dad's house. My dad, Uncle George, and Uncle Victor. Uncle Victor was the youngest, Uncle George second oldest, Dad the middle of the family. And this was at their home where Walmart is now. Uncle Victor came, and that was when he told his brothers he had cancer. So Uncle Victor was a pastor.
Where at?
He had been in McAllen, and he lived in in Groves, near Port Arthur.
I see. So let's go up to your grandfather. What was his name? Your dad's dad?
William Buvinghausen. The census says Benjamin, and he did not like that name, so he went as William.
So I had one census here that I found. It looked like they put down Joseph instead of Joe, but they were using full names there, right?
Yes.
And who else was there at that time? Your family. That's 1940.
Yeah. This is Joseph, which is my dad, Elnora, Marjorie, and JoAnn. Elaine, there was a Miss Cron from Klein that was, I guess, living with us and helping with housekeeping and stuff like that, so Mother could work in the store.
And I was looking up on Ancestry, and some of it may not always be right, but it said your dad, Joseph Heinrich Buvinghausen, was his middle name Heinrich?
Yeah.
Was he born around 1905?
Correct.
This shows Tomball. Was he born at home or born?
He was born at home. His birth certificate says Corville.
Corville. And we'd heard about Corville. It's a little east of that intersection, sounds like, right?
Corville was considered part north, both
I
sides
see.
of, and the Corville community is now centered. Smith Corville Road and
Spring Cypress.
Spring Cypress and the other side.
Ancestry showed Benjamin William Frederick Buvinghausen. Is that right?
And he himself dropped the Benjamin
I see.
and went as William F.
Most people called him William or William F. All right. And this shows him being born in Corville, 1870,
Correct.
and then passing away in Houston in 1946.
Correct.
And you had some photos of an earlier house. Is that where William lived?
This is the back of the house. And this was the front of the house.
And where was that house located?
It was about a mile west of West Montgomery, 249. And it was quite a unique home. It had a basement, which there were not many basements at the time. They had a dug well outdoors. They also had a dug well in the basement. Of course, they butchered their own hogs and cows, made their own sausage. Grandpa would buy a whole stalk of bananas, bring it home, and it would hang in the basement. The dug well in the basement served as a refrigerator. And also, it wasn't as likely to get critters in it like the outdoor one. She did a lot of canning, and all of that was stored in the basement.
So if we go down south of Tomball on West Montgomery Road and turn right on Spring Cypress and go down, was it on the right, that earlier house on the right or on the left?
It was on the left side.
On the left side. And
It had porches upstairs and downstairs. I don't know the gentleman on the horse or with the driving the horses. It looks like they were working because I see the.
it's great to have that history from then and photographs.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the other photo there of that house?
This was the girls swimming in the water trough for the animals.
They had their own swimming pool.
They had their own little swimming pool.
Yeah, shared by the animals when they got thirsty, right? And who was Benjamin Williams? They call him William. Who was his wife?
Ida Holm. Ida was born in Germany. Her family lived in the Spring Branch area, and Dad was telling how when they weren't able to have crops with the ground, they made charcoal, and they piled wood and then put dirt over it, and it smothered and smoldered and made charcoal, and they sold the charcoal.
Did they sell it there at the store?
No,
Oh,
that was in Houston,
In Houston. I see.
because the store wasn't until 1938. And she didn't move out here until after they were married.
Yeah, I see. And who were their kids? Did you have a photo of that family?
Let's see. Okay.
You want to do this big photo?
Oh, the big one, yeah. There were 7 boys and 2 girls. Do you want them named?
Sure, if you can. Here, I'll hold these.
Okay. All right. William and his wife, the mother and father. On the front row is Gertrude, Grandpa, Uncle Victor. Uncle Victor became a pastor, and Aunt Erna. On the back row, we have Carl, Joseph, my dad, Ed, Alvin. Alvin moved out here in later years. Uncle George and Uncle, he was William or Uncle Bill.
You know roughly when that photo might have been? It's pretty far back there, huh?
I don't have it on here.
Yeah.
But I know Uncle Victor was a youngster.
Mm-hmm.
But Grandma made sure they were all dressed well for the picture.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So then this was another photo of your family after it grew a little bit, right?
Yes, this was in 1935 after Grandpa had a home in Houston. And here's Grandpa and Grandma here. And my sister Margie was a toddler. And I was born then in 1938.
And who is this photo of?
And this is a well-behaved picture of my dad. And he loved people. If he had a chance, he would get a little laugh out of you.
He liked to tell jokes, or
Like
Josh
to tell
liked
jokes.
to have fun. Yeah. So your mother, Eleanora Dietrich, is that
Yes.
right? And tell us about the Dietrichs.
Okay. They lived in the Heights off of 14th Street. They were on the south side of Reagan High School. I think it's changed names now to Heights, but Grandpa had a house, and then they had garage apartments, and there was a mother's grandparents had built a house on 14th Street that is still there, beautiful condition. And they had like a farmhouse and acreage beside it. And it was down close to Emmanuel Lutheran Church.
I guess that's back when you could still do some farming right there in Houston, right?
That was many years ago.
And let's back up a little bit to your grandmother, Ida Dorothea Home, is that right? Where was the Home family from?
The Home family was from Stockholm and came to America. I'm not sure of the year, but they were very active in Spring Branch area. And
That's really interesting. I hadn't heard of many Swedish folks coming in the area, but I guess they were coming from everywhere around Europe.
yeah,
Right?
and they were close in that area. And I think her dad was German.
Returning to your dad, Joe Buvinghausen, I guess folks around Tomball mostly called him Joe.
Mr. Joe, yeah.
Mr. Joe.
Or at the store, most of them called him Mr. Joe. And then he was Joe here in Tomball.
So the two gas pumps you had out in front of that building look like similar to the ones we have here at our museum, where they have the glass bubble at the top.
Yes.
And I guess you
And
pump.
you pump the gas. If someone wanted $5 worth of, or no, 5 gallons of gas, you would pump from, and it would fill up 5 gallons, and then it would flow down through to their gas.
Once you pump it up in the top with the pump, then it would gravity flow down into the car?
Gravity flow, yes.
And back then, did people pump their own gas, or did you have a gas attendant that would pump it?
We did that.
Your family did?
Yeah, sometimes if they knew what they were doing, they would do it. But, and I know gas was cheaper further back then. I remember it at 25 cents a gallon. Dad also had air and water available. And he left it out at night because people would come through needing to fill their radiators or air up tires. So that was a courtesy he left out all the time. There were families that would come and get barrels of water. And there was a man that lived off of Cassie Road. And during the daylight, he would come down Hussmith Cornville, which was very short, to get his water. If it was later and going to be dark, he would go all the way up to Luetta Road and come down, because he did not want to go by a cemetery in the dark. He was very superstitious.
So did you grow up working in that store?
Oh, yes.
What do you remember doing there?
We used like a black wax marker. We would mark the price on the cans, on the tops of the can. I stocked groceries. I turned down a date with my husband to be on a Saturday night. He asked, he had come by a couple of times right at closing time. And when my daddy had come in, he said, I gotta go. Finally, he asked me for a date, and I said, well, I'm to mop the store tonight. He drove a 54 Chevrolet with Hollywood mufflers. Believe it or not, he drove through to see if I was doing it. So, eventually he got my brother-in-law and sister to arrange our double date. But I waited on the store. Like Daddy would get a hind quarter of beef, and if somebody wanted a round steak, I learned how to cut the round steak and use the saw to get the bone. Cut cheese and lunch meat. And
Where did y'all get y'all's meat?
from Dixon Packing, and they were off of Buffalo Bayou in Houston. And Dad had gotten some groceries, including some cigarettes one time. When of course, the meat was the last thing he would buy before going home. And his groceries, some of them were gone, especially the cigarettes. So he got curious and he found where they had gotten them from under someone living under the Bayou Bridge. They were already stealing what they could.
Goodness.
So,
Have any other memories of the store or working there?
well, we knew everyone, and Daddy had credit, books, and he would cash their pension checks for them. Many of them just had the X. We had customers, white customers, colored, and you mentioned JoAnn Green. I remember her dad hauled pulpwood, and they were often at the store. The Stallones, they would get basics, flour, 25-pound sacks, coffee. If they ran out of their own lard they had processed, they would get lard. Lye was one of the things that we would use so they could make their own soaps. It was just general groceries. We had ice cream, and we had the dipper, and one or two cones, three dips on a cone was a bit much. We would pack pints or quarts. And there was a can, and the dipper were in the can. And when the inspector or health inspector would come, he'd always shine a light in that can. If you didn't change it any day, you'd get a little clabber like on it, and that'd be a red mark.
Mm.
But
do you remember where your milk came from? Was it some of the creameries down in Houston?
it was either Coronation or Borden.
Right. Same with ice cream?
Saxit ice cream, and they came in 2.5-gallon cardboard containers. And it was from Houston. Another product that was an old family product was sour sausage, Sauer, and they were made in the Heights.
Was that a brand name?
That was a brand name.
Okay.
Sours, the family name.
Family name. Any other products you remember that come to mind that y'all used to sell?
All right. That had hardware, hose and shovels and stuff like that. He had seed. I don't know, mustard seed, turnip seed, cabbage seed. Those products are very similar. They look alike. One year, all right, Daddy would have these bags of seed sitting, and then would measure out how much seed they wanted. One year, someone took each, and they'd run their hand down in each bag, and they mixed the seed. Mm. No one knew it until Mr. Joe, something's wrong with that seed. He said, what? He said, I got everything coming up. And of course, all of them had different dates, but that was his biggest problem.
Yeah.
And,
that's back before they came in the little seed packets, I guess.
Before they came in seed packets.
Yeah.
They had dry goods, overalls, and chambray shirts, and khaki shirts, and
Did you sell candy?
oh yes, penny candy. Tom's Penny, oatmeal hut, little oatmeal things, and
Were they individually cellophane wrapped like they are today, or were they bulk?
no.
No.
Now there were some candies, not like your little Baby Ruth and Butterfinger. Those were individually wrapped. Those were for the Curtis Candy Company. But there were penny candies, not many. Jawbreakers weren't wrapped. Sometimes when some of the families, a big family, would come pay their bill, Dad would reach in and make a little bag of candies for the family.
So I wanted to go to your dad, Joe Buvinghausen, and his work around Tomball. I had, out of one of the Tomball books, I had this photo, and it tells about your family.
Okay, well, this is the picture that I have here. And then this other was Mother and Daddy's 60th wedding anniversary. And it was on Spring Cypress where we celebrated that. I had another one, I don't see it, where they celebrated their 25th anniversary. But Mother and Dad and the three of us sisters were there for that, of course. He was a past president of Tomball Rotary First Hospital Board. The hospital was built in 1948. It was dissolved when the newer hospital and authority was built.
So here I had this photo. I found that on Facebook, but it shows your dad in one of those, I believe.
Yeah, okay. Doesn't say what year. Okay. This was an early school board. E.H. Hardy was president. A.B. Klein was vice president. Homer Brown, also a banker with Tomball. O.W. Thomas was handled gasoline and stuff.
I've heard him called Ollie Thomas.
Ollie Thomas, and he was terribly burned one time in a gas accident.
I remember hearing about that.
But he survived.
Yeah.
And then my dad and a Mr. English.
Great. And I had another photo here of, look like Tomball High School back in the day, and that looked like the Cherry Street location. And it's talking about your dad there.
Yes, this is the Cherry Street. It was Tomball High School before it came Tomball Elementary. I went to school at Tomball Elementary through junior high. And then they built a junior high over as part of Tomball High School before they built a new junior high.
All right, and it shows your dad there was on the school board?
In 1937, requesting Rural High Number 4 become independent. School board mentioned Daddy. I bet that was from close to that picture, previous picture.
Yeah, and this looked like it had your dad on that photo too.
Okay, this is a photo that Esther Bubley took, and it's in the fellowship hall.
She was here in 1945, right?
Yes.
Taking beautiful photos around Tomball.
Oh, yes.
And it sounded like your dad also was on the hospital board. Here's a hospital picture.
He was on the hospital board. Dr. Graham said he was one of them interviewing him to hire him.
To hire Dr. Graham?
Yes. And if you were in the hospital, you could hear the roosters crow in the morning.
Yeah. Here's another one out of one of the other Tomball books, the same old Tomball Hospital. And that's the one that was over on Hospital Street off of Huffsmith Road, right?
You go, is that Cherry? No. What's the name of that street? Not Peach.
Along the tracks.
Carroll Street.
Yeah.
Carroll Street took you straight to the hospital.
Yeah. Carroll Street, right across the railroad tracks from the main downtown part. And
Right,
east.
on the east side of Tomball. I didn't remember Frank Heaton being, yeah.
So this one was interesting. It was a Tomball demonstration club, and it showed a Buvinghausen there. Who is that?
That Tomball Home Demonstration Club, my mother was very active in the Home Demonstration Club. She was active in the Garden Club. And yes, that was my mother.
Great.
And Francis P. McCullough was our home demonstration agent for the county. Lena Mandola lived here in Tomball. And then Miss Fisk lived down off of Dowdell Road.
So tell us about Joe B. Street, which is now Buvinghausen Street.
Okay. Well, it started out Buvinghausen. And then the city, some of the people in the city decided that's too much for children to learn to spell. So they named it Joe B. And I don't remember the year, but they changed it back to Buvinghausen. When the elementary school was built down by Klein's store, they named one street Buvinghausen that's going north and south, and the street going east and west they named Kiefer, after Mr. A.H. Kiefer, the banker.
So you mentioned the bubbly photos here that we have at the Fellowship Hall and Museum. She was here in 1945. Mm-hmm. What do you recall? I know you were really young, about the war years.
Well, I didn't recall a lot myself because I was so young. I remember Miss Featherson was the first grade teacher, and Ms. Letts was my second grade teacher. Billy Sue Wood, a Tomball graduate that had gone on, was about third or fourth grade teacher. But as children, it didn't affect us a lot. It was our parents.
Did you or your husband's family have folks that had to go to war?
My husband had uncles that were in the war, and they did return home. And of course, we often had patriotic meetings and things. And we actually opened our school day with prayer and salute to the flag, and we would sing Star Spangled Banner or one of the patriotic songs.
What school building were you in for elementary?
I went to Tomball Elementary off of Cherry Street, which has the title of decline. And now I think they've redone it, and it looks great. And is it offices? Well, I imagine it's other things now that they have the big office. Yeah.
All right. And which building did you go to middle school or high school in?
Over at the Tomball High School on Main Street.
By then it was at Main Street. Is that the one that burned down?
Yes.
Okay. So you went there before it burned?
Yes, and they didn't burn it to get me out. So.
What year did you graduate?
I graduated in 1956.
And it burned roughly 61,
Something
like that?
like that.
Yeah. All right. And you were telling me earlier about your spending time at the pool.
In the summer, I lived in the pool. It was, I took Red Cross swimming lessons. I think they started with the minnows and went up to sharks. And also they had life-saving. After I completed those, I was a swimming instructor there for many years.
And this is the Tomball swimming pool that was located there near the high school on Main Street?
It was across the little street from the gymnasium.
Yeah. What's your most memorable event growing up here around Tomball?
It was all great. It was. I remember Jack Alley's Cafe. Did you hear of that?
No, I haven't. Tell us about that.
He had a hamburger place, and we could go into town at lunch sometime if they made sure we got back. And he was a bit of a magician. He would put quarters out of people's ears and things like that. Very personable.
Was it like a soda fountain, or what type of restaurant was it?
It was more quick foods.
That's-
I remember Ward's Pharmacy and Marsden Pharmacy further down Main Street. I went to school with Beverly Neidig, and she was still working Neidig's Hardware when they closed to be a bank. It was just a wonderful time to grow up, and we were all good friends. The Winona Theater was in Tomball. It was just a good life.
I remember the Winona. Why don't you describe it for folks that might not have been here to see it back then?
Okay, it was on Main Street, not far from Knobloch's, about the next block over from Knobloch's barbershop now. And they had movies. They would run them for about a week or two. And of course, they had cartoons before the show.
And it only had one theater, right?
Only one theater. And I liked sitting in the middle. I didn't like having to look way up. But I think, did it seat about 100 people?
I don't know. Yeah, sounds about right.
And it was still going in the 60s, because we brought our oldest son, Dwayne, to see. It was the movie, and it had Jerry Lewis in it. And all of a sudden, Dwayne was missing. And I was across the street at the drugstore looking for him everywhere. He had hidden in the back corner. it got scary, so he scrunched down.
Yeah.
That was a scary moment for me.
It was interesting to hear about your German and Swedish families coming into Texas and the different times when they came, but did you ever hear stories of why they came to Texas?
They heard, okay, in Germany, the oldest son got the property. And then there was required service. The guys had to go to the service. And that was not sitting well with some of them. And then, I can't think of it, down toward Corpus Christi, there was a ship area docking.
Velasco?
No,
Oh.
it was another one. And it was destroyed several times by storms, and then they started coming to Houston more. But, and Bernard and I went down there and drove. That doesn't count. But
I know what you're talking about. I can't come up with it either.
anyway, there was advertising how well Texas, the farming and everything was in Texas. So they came.
Followed other German settlers over here.
Right.
Right.
Now, the Mattia family came into New York first. And Johanna was born in New York. And then they had their land grant for 38, and Texana was born in 40.
Do you know, to get that land grant, did they fight at San Jacinto, or how did they get that land grant?
And they applied for the land grants, and they were to live and work on them.
To earn it.
To earn it.
I see.
Now, the soil for the south side of Houston was not the best farming soil. So after they sold it and purchased property off of Spring Cypress.
So, about the German language, do you remember any of your family or your husband's that still had German in the family spoken?
Definitely. Of course, Neidorf was bilingual. And when my husband went to the elementary, Trinity Lutheran School, he was, all they spoke at home was German. And he developed the nickname Wasay, because they would speak in English and maybe a little fast, and he'd, what you say? But he did very well.
Did you learn to speak English as a young person?
He did.
Did you also?
Oh, we were English speaking all
Okay.
the way,
Okay.
yes.
I see.
Dad said he could read the German newspaper to his father. He said, I didn't understand a word of it, but he was able to read it.
Do you know the German that they spoke here in Texas, was it a Texas dialect of German, or was it the same as back home?
Over time, the Texas dialect took over. My mother-in-law spoke to her sister-in-law over in Cyprus, or if they would visit, it was enough English in there, I knew what they were talking about. But, yeah, the Texas dialect, really. And that would have been in the 60s.
Yeah. And do you know of any families around that still have German speakers, even as late as today?
I don't know if Butch Tice does. But there's not a lot.
Yeah. We sure appreciate you coming today and spending time with us. We've really enjoyed hearing about your memories of Tomball.
Thank you.